Let's learn how to read and write weaving drafts by taking this iWeave It software draft and creating a working pattern. Hi everyone, it's Steph and welcome to another video. Today we're going to learn how to read weaving drafts and write your own patterns for a rigid Heddle loom. Weaving drafts can be written in a lot of different ways, but once you understand the basics, it's really easy to understand what the pattern maker is trying to show you. So that's going to be my purpose in today's video, is to give you that really base ground knowledge that you can then build on yourself to write your own patterns and also read other people's patterns for items on a rigid Heddle loom. Let's take this draft that I did as part of the iWeave It software tutorial and turn it into a pattern. When we read patterns, we read them from the center out. So for warping, we read right to left. For weft order, we read top down. And in the center here is our Heddle position, where we place our weft, whether it's up or down. So at the top, this can sometimes be called the threading, the treadling, which is our weft order, and the tie up, which is our Heddle position. And in the middle here is our drawdown, which is our pattern. This is our warp order, reading right to left. The number ones are the slots and the twos are the holes. It can also be vice versa. So this shows us that we have 3 threads of grey, then 1 yellow, repeating until the end one, which is black. And this represents our warp pattern. A simpler way to represent this is to not have the numbers 1 and 2, but have the colours in the positions that they would be in the Heddle. Now we're not going to have a pattern that is 16 threads long. So obviously we're going to repeat this pattern however many times that we need to get the width that we want for our project. In this case, we're going to repeat this pattern 12 times across the warp. Similarly, this is our weft placement pattern, reading top down. An easy way to represent this is, of course, having the colours in place of the numbers. And we're going to repeat this 20 times to get the length that we want for our hand towel. So altogether, this is our basic pattern. Sometimes you'll get a pattern chart for colours, and usually you'll get told what kind of yarn and what kind of reed. In this case, 8/2 cotton doubled on a 10 dent reed. Now let's put all of this together and go just a little bit deeper. So this is our warp order pattern. So we have our basic pattern that we're going to repeat across the warp 12 times. Now each pattern has 16 ends or 16 threads per pattern, and we're repeating this 12 times. So that means 16 times 12 equals 192 ends. Sometimes you'll read in a pattern wind a warp of 192 ends in the following warp order. And this is what this means. Winding a warp, however, would be indirect warping, whereas mostly we would be direct warping our rigid Heddle loom. Let's calculate the width. A 10 dent reed is called that because there are 10 ends per inch in the reed. That's an imperial. In metric, there are 40 ends per 10 centimetres. So to get the width in the reed, 192 ends divided by 10 equals 19.2 inches in imperial. In metric, that's 192 divided by 40 times 10, so that's 48 centimetres width. And this is the width in the reed, or the width that we need to make sure we have for our pattern. Now let's look at our weft order pattern. There are again 16 ends or 16 weft picks per pattern, repeating 20 times. So 16 times 20 equals 320 weft picks for 20 repeats of our pattern. Now let's find and calculate the length of our project. So a 10 dent reed is 10 ends per inch in imperial, or 40 ends per 10 centimetres for metric. We have 320 weft picks divided by 10 equals 32 inches in length in imperial, and 320 weft picks divided by 40 and times 10 equals 80 centimetres in length for metric. This is, of course, for one hand towel, and I will show you how to add multiple hand towels per warp a little bit later on. Also, this is assuming a balanced weave. Now let's summarise our pattern so far. We've got our warp pattern, we've got our weft order pattern, we've got our colour grid, we know it's 8/2 cotton doubled, warp and weft, we have a 10 dent reed, the width is 19.2 inches or 48 centimetres, and the length is 32 inches or 80 centimetres for one hand towel. Now let's calculate how much yarn we will need so you don't need to play yarn chicken. Now, to calculate the warp length, we need to add loom waste. You will need to have enough for your project or projects, plus you need to have enough for tie-on at the start and the waste at the end of your project. For a rigid Heddle loom, you would use around 20 inches or half a metre. You can use more or less depending on whether you are tying on or lashing on. Since this is a hand towel, this loom waste would be more than sufficient for lashing on. For tying on, for let's say a scarf, you may need to use a little bit more in your loom waste. Now let's calculate the length for one item. So that would be 1 times 32 inches plus 20 inches in loom waste, so the warp length would be 52 inches in imperial. In metric, that would be 1 times 80 plus 50 centimetres would be 130 centimetres in metric. Now here in this formula is where you can add more items to one warp. For example, if you wanted to have 3 hand towels on the one warp, then use this formula. Put 3 times 32 plus 20, that would be 116 inches in imperial. In metric, 3 times 80 plus 50 centimetres would be 290 centimetres in metric. But let's just stick to one item plus loom waste for this example. Now, so far we've calculated that we have 192 ends and 52 inches or 130 centimetres length of our warp. Now let's translate that to how much yarn we need. 192 ends times 52 inches is 9,984 inches, which works out to be 277.34 yards in imperial. In metric, that's 192 times 130 is 24,960 centimetres, which is 249.6 metres. Now, that would be it if you were using yarn single in your warp. Remember, in this example, we are using 8/2 cotton doubled in our warp and weft. So we will need to double our results here. So in imperial, 277.34 yards times 2 is 554.6 yards. In metric, 249.6 metres times 2 is 499.2 metres. So now let's do the same for our weft. So we already know we have 320 weft picks, 19.2 inches or 48 centimetres of weaving width. So 320 times 19.62 inches equals 6,144 inches, which translates to 170.67 yards. In metric, 320 times 48 is 15,360 centimetres, which is 153.6 metres. Now again, this would be it if you are using your yarn single, but we are doubling our weft, so we need to double our results here. So that would be 341.34 yards in imperial and 307.2 metres in metric. So now here we are. Total yarn needed in imperial, 896.02 yards, and that's just adding in our warp and weft together. And in metric, 806.4 meters, adding warp and weft together. So now our pattern looks like this. We have our warp threading order, our weft pick order, and we have our colour chart. We know it's 8/2 cotton doubled, warp and weft. We have 192 ends, 19.2 inches or 48 centimetre weaving width in a 10 dent reed. We have a length of one piece of 32 inches, which is 80 centimetres in metric. Total yarn, including loom waste, 897 yards or 807 metres. And I always round up just to be safe. But there's one thing we haven't talked about. What about individual yardage or meterage needed for individual colours in the pattern? This is actually easier than you might think to calculate. All we need to do is calculate the percentage of each colour and apply that to the total yardage. Let's do that now. We can bring this back to our individual pattern for warp and weft. There are 16 ends in the warp and 16 ends in the weft. So in total, we have 32 ends in the pattern. So if we look at the colours, we have 2 black threads, one in the warp, one in the weft, out of 32. In yellow, we have a total warp and weft, 7 threads out of 32. And for grey, we have a total of 23 threads in warp and weft out of 32. Now, we use this to calculate the percentage. So for black, 2 divided by 32 times 100 is 6.25%. Yellow is 7 divided by 32 times 100 is 21.88%. And grey, 23 divided by 32 times 100, 71.87%. Now let's apply this to our yardage. Now that we have our percentages, we can apply them to our yardage and meterage and find out how many yards and meters for each colour. So 6.25% of 897 or 807 is 56.06 yards or 50.44 metres of the black colour. For yellow, that works out to be 196.26 yards or 176.57 metres. And for the grey, that works out to be 644.67 yards or 579.99 metres. And now our pattern looks like this. And yes, this is it. So we have our warp order and our repeats, our weft pick order and repeats. I've added the yardage and meterage to the colour chart so you can see at a glance how much you need for each colour. 8/2 cotton doubled, warp and weft, 19.2 inches or 48 centimetre weaving width in a 10 dent reed. 1 towel, length of 32 inches or 80 centimetres, total yarn length 897 yards or 870 metres, including a 20 inch or 50 centimetre loom waste allowance. I hope you enjoy this free pattern. I've just mucked around a little bit and done some different colour combinations in case you wanted to weave this pattern up yourself. I apologise, it's been very math heavy, but I think it's really important to be able to write your own drafts because it gives you such a deeper understanding, especially if you want to read drafts that other people have written. But once again, thank you so much, especially if you made it all the way to the end. I appreciate every single one of you. I love all of your comments. Thank you for all of your likes. If you haven't subscribed, do so already. And thank you all and have a wonderful day.